In this video, I'm going to show you step-by-step instructions on how to replace the power or lock button on the iPad Air 4. I've got no explanation for this, but I've never done as many power lock buttons on an iPad as the one with the Touch ID. They always seem to break. I think it's just because it's made out of glass and it cracks easily when it's dropped on its edge. But every single one that I see always gets dropped on this bottom edge. Anyway, I've got the heat mat set to 85 degrees C, and I'm going to put it face up like that. I'm going to leave it there for about 5 to 10 minutes and let this get nice and hot. Then we'll come back to it and get the screen off. Removing the screen is the hardest bit of this job, and it's important to remember that all the cables for this run along this right hand edge, and the device opens from left to right, like opening the back cover of a book. So let's get it warmed up and then we'll come back to it in a minute. Now that this has had time to warm up, we're going to run a bead of isopropyl alcohol all the way around the edges and just let that soak in to soften the adhesive a little bit more. Now we're going to get the suction cup and I'm going to pop it on the left hand side of the device just here, and I'm just going to sort of peel up and see if it's warm enough to open up. As I said before, the hardest bit of this is to open the iPad without breaking it. But you can see that we've created a small gap when we're lifting it up. We don't want to lift it any more than that because we do risk cracking it. But with this gap created, we can now get a little blue pick and start running it down the edge. I'm just running it sort of backwards and forwards just to open it a little bit more, but I'm also lifting up on it as well. I'll add some more isopropyl alcohol and then continue. It's sort of cutting between the adhesive and the glass and just separating it really nicely. The Air 4 is probably one of the best models to open because the bezels are very thin and the adhesive isn't too thick. You might have noticed that I moved up the suction cup a little bit, just to this top corner, where we'll carry on moving around the device, around the corner. The adhesive is thickest in the corner. You don't want to go too mad with the isopropyl. You see this little tip that I've got on the end of it. That's just going to restrict how much is going in there. And I'm only putting a little splash at a time in. But you can see that this is opening up really nicely now. The top and the left-hand edge is done. So I'll move down to the bottom corner. And I'm just going to lift it up, same as we did before. Run the pick in. A little bit more isopropyl. And eventually this has just come loose just like that. So now we're into the iPad. We'll take it over to the workbench, where we'll get it opened up. So now that we've released all that adhesive and it's nice and easy to come off, we don't have to worry about this edge here because we're going to unfold it on that one and that'll do the job for us. It's a great idea at this point to pop a heavy object like a mug behind the iPad, and then we can just lean it on it so that it doesn't fall over whilst we're working on it. This is the battery connector here, and we're just going to unscrew the single crosshead screw, pop it to one side safely for later. Then we're going to get a thin bit of plastic card, and we're just going to split between the board and the battery so that that power is isolated from the device. Continuing with disassembly, we're going to unscrew this screw here. And then with this one, you have to sort of slide it out. It's a little bit awkward just to release that shield. And then with the shield out of the way, we can use the plastic spudger just to disconnect the LCD connector and the first of the two touch connectors. Lift those up, and then we can move up to this next shield where we've got another two crosshead screws, which aren't very magnetic. Remove those two. Store the screws safely for later. Lift up the shield with your tweezers, and then use the plastic spudger to disconnect the last digitizer connection. And then to remove the screen, just sort of fold it back until the adhesive separates itself from the chassis. Store the screen safely for later. This is a very fragile part. And now we're going to concentrate on this top area where of course our button is that we need to remove. The first screw that needs removing is this shield just here. Get that out of the way. Use tweezers to lift up the shield and then disconnect this flex cable just here. Next, we've got another couple of screws just here and here. My screwdriver is really not magnetic today, so I do apologise. I keep dropping all the screws. And we need to just slide the ambient light sensor over like that and then lift it up from underneath just to separate it away from the device like that. With that out of the way, there's another screw here. There's some tape that we need to peel back just there, which reveals a little ZIF connector for that ambient light sensor. Remove the sensor and store it for later. That's another screw just here. Remove that one. This screw needs to be removed too, although I'm not 100% sure, but we'll do it anyway. Now I'm going to just lift up this. The adhesive on these flex cables on the iPad is very strong, so you might have to get your tweezers underneath to give you a little helping hand when you're removing this. But you can see that we've got just about all the flex cable removed from there now, and we just need to get this little plastic bracket out of the way. I think that the little scrapey cutting tool will be the best thing to get underneath this. And once we've got it underneath it, we need to just sort of pop it out, just like that. And we're going to keep hold of this because I don't think that the new flex cable will have it. And then what I usually find is that these can be awkward to pop out, but you can see the button underneath there. We'll get the tweezers and just sort of try and poke it through like that, so that it peels out. But usually when these are damaged, the chassis has a little bit of bend to it and it can make it a little bit difficult. That's how we get the button out. Now, it's very important to note that when we replace this button, the Touch ID function will be non-existent. You can't recover that because of Apple's parts pairing, but we will leave this customer with a working button. Like I said previously, like I said before, the chassis area around the button can become damaged, and sometimes there's some work to do to sort of manipulate it back into place. But this one doesn't look too bad. I'm just going to see how this works with the new button in and see if it does work, because if we don't have to do any move into it, then it's better. But a good tool to have is a little miniature file, because you can file out the little hole here, or you might have to bend it a little bit with the, I use the back edge of the tweezers like that to just sort of bend it back into shape. That works as well. But I'm just going to try with the new part and see what happens. I think generally, I don't think there's anyone making aftermarket parts for these, although this does look a bit like a reconditioned one. But the basics of it are that it goes in, it needs to go in that way, then it folds over like that, then it folds over like that, doesn't it? So that we can plug it in. So let's try and get this fitted. I have done a few of these, but they are generally awkward. Any button installation is a pain, but it looks like it's going to fit all right in there. Yeah, there's just a crack on the actual button that's stopping it from working, I think. You just got to sort of thread it in, not put too much pressure on it from behind, because there is the flex cables in there. I think we're going to have to do a little bit of manipulation to make this fit. Let me see if I can show you. It's going to fall out every time that I show you. You can see it's fitting in there, but it's not sliding in there. So let's go and find a file and bastardize this one. So to make this fit, I'm just going to get the little file and I'm just going to file off the inside a little bit, just to stretch it out and manipulate it back into shape, I suppose. You want to try and minimize any damage that you're doing to the actual outside bit, what you'll see. So we're just concentrating on getting on the inside of this. So I'm just trying to line it up and see if it'll fit, but I just need a little bit more out of this one. So a more suitable file is this smaller one where I can get into the sort of round bit of it. And I don't mind if I take more than I need off, as long as it's not a ridiculous amount. Obviously I don't want to be really jabbing in there because you've got the camera and other components that we don't want to be getting shards of metal, little metal filings in there. So we'll give it a clean out afterwards as well. That's much better. So we can see that it goes in all the way. Lovely. Let's get it back on the bench and fixed in. I'll just take it out temporarily, give it all a good brushing off with the dusting brush. I'd really recommend some of these little, well, big detailing brushes. They're really handy in repair. I think they sell them in Halfords for about £10. And now we've got that in place, let's drop that in like that. It sits perfectly now. Then it was the plastic shield for it. Before we put that plastic shield on, we need to bend over this flex cable like that. You might not be able to see much because my thumb's holding it in the way. There we go. Just as a little side note, next time I don't have to take this screw out, I don't think. Or maybe it was holding the plastic in. I think it was. Yeah, it was. Now there was this little grounding screw just underneath. The longer one holds the plastic thing in place. You might have to just wiggle it around a bit until it sits in the screw hole. There's another one, a longer one here. So it's a very good job to make sure that it clicks properly before you screw it all down. Well, once the plastic's screwed down anyway, make sure that it clicks. So with that in place, we can re-secure the flex cable just here. There's one more screw holding down that small part here. Actually, let's just make sure that that doesn't slide under. Slide in just there, sit flat there, and then there's one screw just here that holds it down. Ambient light sensor. Might have to flick the hinge up. With that in place, we'll pop that down. Hold that over into place. And then we just got that shield that sits on top of everything, and that's held down by that single crosshead screw. So now it's just a case of reinstalling the screen. My assistant has very kindly applied some Tessa tape onto these. Just make sure before reinstalling the screen that your battery pick has not moved. Then simply reconnect your LCD cable, followed by the 2 digitizer cables, and this one last. They're a bit of a pain. Pop your mug behind the screen again so it doesn't fall over whilst you're working on it, and then we've just got the 2 shields. The top one's held down by the 2 little silver screws. Then the long awkward one, you have to slide in first just here. This is awkward. And then let it fold over, re-secure it down. Disconnect the battery isolator and re-secure that into place. Now before you seal it up, because sealing it is fairly final and you don't really want to do that again, of course we need to test it. So I think this one's been sat on my desk a couple of days, so it's probably out of charge. But I can test it by plugging it in. Oh, it looks like we might have some charge. I'm just going to cover it up, make sure that we've got no image of kids or whatever on there, because we don't like to do that. We don't like to dox people. But we can feel that the button's good. It's going to give us this notification, unable to activate Touch ID on the iPad. But when we press it, it locks, unlocks, lock, unlock. You know how it does. So we just got to seal this back up now. But that just about completes this repair on how to replace the top button or power button or lock button on the iPad Air 4th generation. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.